Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi. Welcome to Mondays with Maja. So today is episode 20, and we are talking about this brand new book that I am loving. It is Wolfpack. So Wolfpack is by Abby Wambach, and it says, How to Come Together, Unleash Our Power, and Change the Game. I'll be posting a lot of Instagram stories after this. This was such a great book. So today's episode, I am basically talking about what this book is all about. Okay, so Abby is a two-time Olympic gold medalist. She is a FIFA world champion and the highest all-time international goal scorer for both men and women. Hello from Manitoba. Hello, thank you for joining in. Okay, so she is the all-time international goal scorer for both men and women players. She has scored 184 goals, and that record still stands till today. She's an activist for equality and inclusion, and she is the co-founder of Wolfpack Endeavor, which is a leadership development program for women. Her latest, or actually this is her second book, is called Wolfpack. What's wrong? My daughter's having a moment right now. Steve is putting her to bed, so okay, that's fine. Okay, so let me tell you how she came up with this idea. So this book is based on a commencement speech that she gave in 2018 for Barnard College, and that speech went viral. And so that speech really became the book. So when she got asked to give this commencement speech, she was trying to come up with, well, what am I going to talk to these young graduates about? And she had at the time watched a TED Talk. And the TED Talk was about wolves in Yellowstone National Park. So in 1995, this is just a quick backstory around how she came up with the name of Wolfpack and the message behind the book. So in 1995, wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park. And they had been absent from that park for about 70 years. And what had happened in those 70 years was that the deer population sort of took over, ate all the vegetation, and the riverbanks were in trouble, the land was in trouble. And so the rangers that at that time made this somewhat controversial idea to introduce wolves into Yellowstone National Park so that they could bring down the deer population. So what ended up happening was, for sure, the deer population got trimmed down. The deer started staying in their own area away from the wolves. The vegetation started coming back. The deers completely changed their behavior. Vegetation started growing back. The tree sizes quintupled in 6 years. Birds, beavers moved back. The beavers built dams, which provided habitats for otters. Berries started growing on the trees. Bears came back. So to make a long story short, the animal ecosystem changed. It flourished. The plant regeneration started happening. So everything that people had feared, which were the wolves, ended up being that the wolves were their salvation. And she immediately thought of women. Women are feared for their opinions, for their education, for their demands. Women are viewed as a threat. And her whole message is that really the women are the salvation to the world's problems. And that's how she came up with Wolfpack. Wolfpacks need rules. They need a system. They need leadership. And that is how she came up with these 8 rules, which is the basis of the book. So this is a really short, quick read. You can read this book in a day. It's 100 pages, and it's divided into 8 rules. So the main message is to stop playing by the old rules. That the old rules is just going to keep getting you the status quo. And what you need are new rules. And if you just keep doing what you've always done, you're just going to get the same thing, right? And so the old rules aren't going to help women get more leadership positions, narrow the pay gap, fight for equality. The old rules are just going to keep us static in the status quo. And so she gave this example at the beginning of the book that the U.S. national women's soccer team had this dream. They had a goal to fill stadiums. And FIFA at the time told the women's national soccer team, women's soccer isn't that interesting. You can't sell tickets. Nobody's going to fill a stadium to watch women's soccer. And the women's soccer team were committed to changing that perception. They were committed to breaking the old rules. So they started a ground roots movement to get young people interested in soccer again. So they started going to schools and soccer camps and spreading the word. And sure enough, in their last final game was played in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, and it was attended by 90,000 people. It was the largest crowd ever to attend a women's sporting event. It was also the most watched soccer game in the US, with 40 million people watching on TV worldwide. And it actually generated higher ratings than the professional hockey and basketball teams for men that year. So that was just one example of so many in the book of how we have to break out of our comfort zones. We have to take risks. We have to stop listening to people who tell us to stay in our own lane. So the rule number one, and I'm going to do some Instagram stories after this about all the 8 rules. Okay. Hi, Derek. Hi, Leanne. I haven't spoken to you in a while. Hope all is well with you. Have you had the baby yet, Leanne? Okay, so rule number 1, you were always the wolf. So the old rules say stay on the path, and the new rules is all about creating your path. So Abby talks about in the book how every good thing that ever happened to her in her life came when she got out of her comfort zone. Every good thing that ever happened to her in her relationships, in her love life, in her sporting career, everything came when she went off the beaten path, when she forged her own route. And so she refers to these people as, hi Elaine, she refers to these people as the Wolfpack. So she says, wear what you want, love who you love, become what you imagine, create what you need. You were never Little Red Riding Hood, you were always the wolf. So she encourages people to flip the script, basically, right? We get these messages constantly growing up about what girls should sound like, what boys should sound like. And the messages usually are boys should contain their emotions, that the girls should constantly be humble and grateful and nice. The boys should take risks. The girls should be careful, stay safe, all of that. So, what? Okay.
People know what they're talking about.
I know. I've already. Thank you for that, Steve. Thank you for interrupting me. Brownie, you just like totally messed me up now. So she talks about how these messages pigeonhole us. They pigeonhole us, and that we have to start creating our own path. Okay, so rule number two in the book is be grateful and ambitious. Be grateful and ambitious, right? Derek, are you laughing at Steve or me? So after retiring from professional women's soccer, ESPN gave Abby a job to commentate on men's soccer. Actually, you know what? I'm going to talk about that for the next one. Okay, this is a different This is a different example. So after she retired, ESPN gave her the Icon Award, and they awarded this to her, Kobe Bryant from the NBA and Peyton Manning from the NFL. And so all three were on the stage, and she remembers in that moment she was feeling grateful, just grateful to be included, just grateful to be on the stage. And then right when the ceremony ended and they were walking off the stage, it dawned on her that both Kobe and Peyton were walking off the stage. They were all retiring, but they were walking off the stage to completely different futures. And they were walking into financial prosperity. They were walking into freedom. Their hustling days were long gone, and her hustling days were just beginning. And in that moment, she had to really sit with that emotion, and she realized that she was angered, that she gave soccer her all, her blood, her sweat, her tears. She was injured. She was the highest goal scorer for both men and women, and yet she had nowhere near the affluence that these men had. And just to give you some stats on this, so 2018 FIFA Men's World Cup winning team got $38 million in prize money. $38 million was 19 times the amount the women got. So the men's U.S. soccer team makes 19 times what the women's U.S. soccer team makes. The women's national soccer team had a profit of $6.6 million, whereas the men's soccer team had a profit of just under $2 million. So she realized in that moment that she had spent a lifetime being grateful just to be included, being grateful just for the crumbs that were left over, being grateful just to have a paycheck, being grateful to represent her country, to play a sport that she loved. But she didn't stand up and demand more. She never stood up and demanded equality. She didn't stand up for other women who maybe didn't have as much power or representation as she did. And this enormous pay gap has devastating impacts on women. So this is some US data, but I'll give you Canadian data also. So white women make 81.1 cents on the dollar for every dollar a white man makes. So 81.1 cents. Black women make 63 cents. Latina women make 54 cents for every dollar. And Canadian data, we have the latest data in general shows that Canadian women as a whole make anywhere from 84 to 87 cents per the dollar. 2016 data that broke it down by ethnicity showed that women of color make 67 cents. Indigenous or Aboriginal women make 65 cents for every dollar a white man makes, and disabled women in Canada make 54 cents for every dollar a non-disabled man makes. And so she had this great quote in the book that said, "Our gratitude, women's gratitude, is how power uses the tokenism of a few women to keep the rest of the women in line." And so she has a message to her Wolfpack, and she has a message to women in general, that it's not enough just to be grateful. It's not enough just to have gratitude. It's not enough just to be thankful for the position that you're in, that we have to demand more, that we have to fight for more, that we can absolutely be grateful and ambitious. We can be grateful and brave. We can be grateful and persistent, be grateful and loud, be grateful for what you have, but yet still demand more and more and more. So that was rule number 2. Rule number 3 is lead from the bench. So the old rule was to wait for permission to take the lead. And the new rule is about you lead now. You lead from wherever you are. So she has another great quote, and she said that the picture of leadership is not just a man at the head of a table. It's also every woman who is allowing her voice to guide her life and the lives of those that she cares about. She says that leadership is not a position. It's not a position to earn. It is a power to claim. That it is the blood that runs through your veins, and that it's not the privilege of a few, but it's the right and the responsibility for all of us. And it's not a title that the world gives you, but it's an offering that you have to give to the world. Isn't that a great quote? So she gave this example of leading from the bench. So at age 35, she realized that she didn't belong on the starting roster anymore. She was nearing the end of her career. Her body had a lot of sustaining injuries that she was dealing with, a lot of pain, a lot of chronic injuries. She was one of the oldest players on the team. And so she had to sit down with the coach and come to that difficult decision that although she was the highest goal scorer of all time, she shouldn't be on the starting roster anymore. That she was going to sit and be on the bench and cheer for the team. And she recognized that she didn't have to be the star player anymore to still be a leader. That you can lead from wherever you are in life. And so she mentioned, where can you be a leader? A leader can be volunteering your time. It can be taking care of somebody in need. It can be listening to someone's story rather than talking over them. Leadership is about, recognizing that you need to go to therapy. You need help with some of your issues. It's about talking about difficult issues, having those difficult conversations. Leadership is also about creating boundaries and letting others know what is or is not acceptable to you and your family. Leadership, she says, is taking care of yourself and empowering others to do the same. So, she had another great quote here that I loved. So she says, if you have a voice, you have influence to spread. If you have relationships, you have hearts to guide. If you know young people, you have futures to mold. If you have privilege, you have power to share. If you have money, you have support to give. If you have a ballot, you have policy to shape. If you have pain, you have empathy to offer. If you have freedom, you have others to fight for. If you are alive, you are a leader. Rule number 4, make failure your fuel. Make failure your fuel. The old rules used to mean that if you failed, you were out of the game. The new rules mean if you fail, you're finally in the game. So when Abby joined the U.S. women's national team, she went into their locker room and she noticed that they had a picture on the wall that every player would look at before they would take the arena and before they would go out to play. And that photo was a picture of defeat. That photo was a picture of the Norwegian team winning over the U.S. The U.S. had lost, and that's exactly what the U.S. women's team put up on their locker room, to look at that picture of defeat. And so she said, as a new junior member to the team, why in the world would you tape a picture of failure? Why would you look at that before you go and play? And the other team members said to her that although winning was still their number one goal, that picture represented that failure was not a defeat for them. That failure was not a fear for them. Failure was their fuel. They didn't reject failure, and they didn't view a failure as a sign of that they were not worthy enough to win or that they were not winners. Instead, failure for them, with that photo, failure was an act of remembrance. Failure was a lesson to be learned. Just like we've spoken about so many times here before, failure is just information. So how do women typically handle failure? We know this, right? We tend to fail once and then not again because we expect perfection from ourselves. We expect the first time we do something to nail it. And if we don't do it well, we start to internalize failure and doubt and fear, and then that breeds the imposter syndrome. So we oftentimes aim for perfection, and then when we don't achieve it, and perfectionism is unrealistic, we crumble. And so she encourages her Wolfpack to continue to fail up, fail upward, fail forward. Because that is something that a lot of men, not all men, but a lot of men continuously do. We've all been in a situation where we've been in a room with someone who knows less than us, but who speaks up more often. Somebody who may not know anything on a subject matter, but yet they're the ones that are speaking the loudest. And failure just sort of falls off of them. They don't internalize their failures. So we have to relearn how we deal with failure. We have to retrain ourselves so that we look at failure as information and we let that failure fuel us as we move forward. And the example that I started to give earlier was after retirement, ESPN hired her to comment on the men's 2016 European Championship live on air. And this is what a lot of former athletes do. They go into be sports commentators. And within 5 minutes of being live on air with these seasoned commentators, she was completely out of her depth. She knew it, Twitter knew it, everybody else knew it. The other commentators there knew everybody's jersey number and sports stats, and they could call plays live, and she just froze. She completely froze. And in that moment, she had two options. She could let that failure define her, or she could let that lesson fuel her. And she chose to let that lesson of failure, and a very public failure for her, because the reaction was immediate on Twitter. She let that fuel her forward. And so she may have initially crossed off sports commentating off of her list of what she could do for now, but a few months after that, she ended up founding her leadership organization. So that commenting television failure didn't end her speaking role. It didn't end her speaking job. What it did is it helped narrow down her focus to help her figure out what she wanted to comment on. And what she wanted to comment on was women's equality, women's leadership. And so she says in her book, try, fail, feel it burn, then transform that failure into your fuel. She also encourages parents to let their kids fail as often as possible rather than trying to prevent them from feeling that pain, that learning from failure, even if you're the one that cost the team a game or a championship, that it's important to go through that emotion and go through that as your team and learn from that failure. Failure is just information. So rule number 5, champion each other. So the old rules were be against each other, be in competition with each other. And the new rule is be for each other. So she talks about in the book how sometimes you will be the leading goal scorer. Sometimes you will be the star player. Sometimes you will be the person on the stage that everyone gives a standing ovation to. But you didn't get there completely on your own. None of us own our successes completely 100% on our own. We were helped in some part by someone, somewhere, somehow. And so every time she scored a goal, and she scored 184 of them, she would point to the defensewoman. She would point to the goalie. She would point to the midfielder. She would point to the people on the bench, her teammates. She would point to the coach to acknowledge that it was their contribution also that led to that goal. And she had another quote here. I've never scored a goal in my life without getting a pass from someone. Every goal I've ever scored belonged to my entire team. So she encourages women to start amplifying the voices of other women, to start demanding seats for other people to join the table. And championing each other is really difficult in a culture or a society that likes to pit women against each other. And we've done this for so long, just to be that one token woman at the seat at the table, be that one token CEO. And the scarcity, or the mindset of scarcity, has been implanted in all of us. But we know that scarcity is a lie. One woman's success does not mean that there is less for us. There are so many external barriers women face that we can't have infighting, right? We've got to support each other. We have to recognize that one woman's success doesn't diminish our own capabilities for success, but it should strengthen it instead. We have to stop looking at other women as direct competition and start acting like a coalition, that we're all in this together, that we should support each other's victories and wins and successes. And our responsibility as women are endless. You know this, right? We do the cooking, the laundry, the pet care, the elder care, the child care. We're the cooks, the nutritionists, the event planners, the appointment makers. We are the Uber drivers, the book readers, the gift buyers, the birthday reminders. We do all of that. But there's one more role that we need to do, and that's really to embrace each other, support each other, lift each other up as women. We have to draw strength and encouragement from one another's success. One woman's success does not negate our own ability. There's room for all of us to be successful in our own areas. There's room for all of us. So that was rule number 5, to support and lift up one another. And certainly the research on mentorship and sponsorship is quite robust. We know how valuable it is. We absolutely know how valuable it is for women to be supported by other women. Okay, rule number 6 was demand the ball. So the old rules were play it safe and pass the ball. And the new rule is believe in yourself and demand the effing ball. Demand the effing ball. So she tells this story about humbleness. And for any of you who have listened to my talks or maybe in my lectures, you know how much I hate the friggin' word humble. Humble is having or showing a low estimate of one's own worth. And that's not something I want for me, my daughter, my students, or anybody listening to me. Having or showing a low estimate of one's own worth. That's the definition of humbleness. And yes, that is assumed to be this virtue, and it's assumed to be this characteristic that women should endeavor for, that we should go after. Just be humble, just be grateful. Humbleness is not a winning strategy for us. Humbleness isn't a virtue. It's meant to keep us back, hold us down, and keep us in place. I think humbleness sort of breeds this scarcity mentality also. So she gives this story about how she watched one of her idols playing soccer. And this idol was playing to win. And she was giving it her all. And in that moment, Abby realized that she had been playing at 75% capacity because she was worried about hurting other people's feelings. She didn't want that to happen. And so what she was doing is she was dimming her own light to avoid hurting other people's feelings. That's when we sort of internalize humbleness. And that's where it leads to, right? It leads to you stepping back. It leads to you dimming your own light. And she was playing at 75% of her capability so that she wouldn't potentially outshine others. And so in that moment when she was watching one of her idols play and give it her all and not give a crap about other people's feelings, that she was playing to win, she realized that she had to own her greatness. She had to give 100%. She had to 100% believe in herself. And the value of doing that, the value of owning your greatness, is that it creates a domino effect, because it opens the door for other women to start owning their own greatness and to start believing in themselves. And so she has a call to the Wolfpack. And so she says in here, believe in yourself. Stand up and say, give me the effing ball. Give me the effing job. Give me the same pay as the guy standing next to me. Give me the promotion. Give me the microphone. Give me the Oval Office. Give me the respect I deserve, and give it to my Wolfpack too. So the point of that is to start to demand more and to not worry about outshining others, but just to shine as bright as you can. Rule number 7 is bring it all. So that is, the old rule is to lead with dominance and create followers, and the new rule is to lead with humanity and cultivate leaders. So the example here in her book here is they got a new Swedish coach, and she was hired for the U.S. women's national soccer team. And at that point, the U.S. women's national soccer team was dominant. It was obviously a force to be reckoned with. They were winning all over the place. They were winning by sheer force. They were the most powerful, the strongest team, clearly the most dominant. And so Pia Sundhage, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. Anyways, the Swedish coach, Pia, she came into the locker room to talk to the team. And she told them that she wanted them to win differently. She still wanted them to win, but she wanted to change how they were winning. She still wanted to be the best in the world, but she believed that there was a higher level within them. There was a higher level within them that they needed to reach. So although they were winning, she wanted them to change how they were winning. Instead of winning by brute force, she wanted them to win by, quote, honoring themselves, their teammates, their opponents, and the game, to win with creativity, innovation, and not just physical dominance. And then her coach took out a guitar and started playing The Times They Are A-Changin' by Bob Dylan. So can you imagine that? You're in the locker room and you just got a new coach, and she tells you, I want you to win differently, and then starts strumming the guitar and starts singing this song. And everybody's like, what is happening here? And so what ended up happening is that they realized that they had been winning by using the old school rules of leadership, which was the coach tells you what to do, the captain tells you what to do, and you do it. There's two leaders, the coach and the captain, and that's about it. And everybody else follows, and everybody else gets in line. And what this new Swedish coach was trying to embody and trying to explain to them was that they needed to all be leaders. They needed to all voice their opinions. They needed to know that their opinions were worthy of being heard, even if you weren't a captain, even if you weren't a coach. It was a new type of leadership, and everybody had the right to give their opinion and voice their ideas. And instead of having a few leaders, now everyone on the team was a leader. And everybody on the team was encouraged to be brave and to be vulnerable. And so if you know, or if you've read anything by Brené Brown, you know that her definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. We've been conditioned to think that vulnerability is weakness. But it's not about winning or losing. It's about having the courage to show up even when the result is unknown, to show up even when taking a chance is risky. Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is leadership. Vulnerability is bravery and courage. And so by being vulnerable and laying bare your fears and stating that you may not know how the end result is going to come about, it again creates a domino effect for other people to lay bare their fears. This often happens when we sort of destigmatize failure and we start talking about our imperfections. I know that when I start talking about this in my workshops or in my lectures, students listen, they lean in, they relate, they resonate more to my failures than they do to my successes. And that's the human connection. That's the desire to feel connected, right? That's in all of us. And when we decide that vulnerability is not a weakness, it is not a liability, that's when change happens. Because one person starts and then the rest sort of recognize that their vulnerability is not a liability, that there's common humanity among us. And so the last rule, rule number 8, is find your pack. So the old rule used to be you're on your own. And the new rule is you are not alone. You are not alone. Everybody has their own pack. Everybody has their own tribe. Everybody has their own wolf pack. So in the book, she talks about after retiring, she gave her body 3 years to sort of recover from being a professional athlete for her whole life. And after that point, she decided to take up running. And she hated it. And she wasn't good at it. And she didn't enjoy it. And it was painful and it was treacherous. And at that point, she was newly married. And so she says to her wife, Glennon Doyle, some of you may know her, she's an author, a speaker. She's talking about, did I just lose my athleticism even though I've been a professional athlete for 30 years? What's going on? Like, why can I not just run? And her wife, Glennon Doyle, says that she hasn't in fact lost her athleticism. What she has lost is her pack that she was used to for her entire life, running with a team, being in pain with a team, being encouraged and supported with a team around her constantly. And what she had found herself now in retirement was she was on her own. She was running on her own. And so Abby says in the book, our suffering was lessened because we shared it. Life is harder as a lone wolf. We all need our pack. So after her commencement speech went viral in 2018, she was inundated with messages of support from people. And she saved all those messages to reread when she becomes overwhelmed or just stressed out. And one of those messages, I'll just read a part of that message. And this woman says, my entire life, I've been the only one. The only woman in the room, the only woman at the table, and I've raised my daughters without a village. Being a woman is a special kind of lonely. We are siloed into our own little spaces, isolated from each other. Men have the old boys club. We need one. And I want a wolf pack for me too. What that gets to basically is the research around social support. We all need a social support team. You need people around you to pump you up, to motivate you, to encourage you, to support you, to listen to you. And we have to be brave and vulnerable enough to reach out and ask for that when we need it. So I loved that letter so much and this story in here because social support does a tremendous amount for both our physical and our mental and our emotional health. It helps us deal with health and illness and life issues or stress in general. It shows us that having somebody, even just one person in your life, can be better for your physical and mental health. Leaning on friends, on family, on coworkers for social support provides us with, I'll just briefly mention 2 types of social support. So one is emotional and the second is informational. So emotional support comes when we feel like we have a confidant, when we feel like we can talk about our fears, we can talk about the intimate stuff, we can talk about the scary stuff, we can be vulnerable, we can talk about our concerns. And what we get in return is encouragement and support and acceptance. We feel listened to, we feel acknowledged, we feel validated, we feel nurtured, we feel loved. That's what emotional support can get you. And informational support is advice, suggestions, or important information that people you trust can give you to help you make a critical decision in your life. Having meaningful social relationships can do as much to the maintenance of good health as avoiding smoking. The research around social support is strong. Social support is viewed as a determinant of health. And what social support does for us is it acts as a buffer. It acts as a buffer against negative life events. There are a lot of physical and mental benefits to having a social support team around you. It helps you deal with stress, manage difficult life events, and it becomes this intervening factor between the stressor and you. And I guess I just want to leave you with that final thought about figuring out where you get your social support from. And actually, I'll just go over the 8 rules here. So, 1, create your own path. 2, be grateful for what you have and demand that you deserve more. 3 is lead now from wherever you are. 4 means failure means you're finally in the game. 5, be for each other. 6, believe in yourself and demand the ball. Demand the ball. 7 is lead with humanity and cultivate leaders. And 8 is you're not alone, you've got your pack. You're not alone, you've got your pack. So if you have a chance, this was a really great book. You can watch her commencement speech on YouTube. If you just Google Abby Wambach, Barnard Commencement speech, it'll come up right away. It's basically the book. There's lots of, actually I made Abby the Femme Friday last Friday, so we have a few videos of her on the Instagram. She's a pretty badass, kick-ass woman, and I really loved the messages in this book. And I think that's about it. So I'll be posting some stories about this shortly, and that's about it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in, and we'll post this on YouTube tonight. Yeah, we'll post on YouTube. Jennifer, love your lives and videos. Hi from Manitoba. Hello, Jennifer. Thank you for chiming in from Manitoba. What time is it in Manitoba? Is it the same time? No, 2 hours.
Yeah, I think it's 2 hours.
2 hours.
6 o'clock.
It's 6 o'clock there now. It's 6 o'clock there now. Hello, Jennifer. Thank you so much. I think next week I'm going to go back to confidence because there's so much there to unpack. 7:40. Yes, it's 7. She says it's 7:45. It's 1 hour. Oh, we were wrong. So it's 1 hour back.
Noon next week.
Oh yeah, next week we're gonna try doing live at noon. We're gonna see how that works. Noon actually works so much better for me. 8 o'clock is tight for me to do. So anyways, we're gonna try that. We're gonna see how it works. But as usual, all of my Instagram lives go on my YouTube if you can't catch them. If you have any topic ideas that you want me to discuss, you can just send them my way on Instagram. You can send me a DM. Thank you so much, everybody. See you next week.